Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things, Star Wars. With the finale of Season 1 of Ahsoka, I've seen a lot of discussion recently on Sabine and her Force abilities. A lot of people are really angry about her finally being able to use the Force, and their argument is she's been training for 2 weeks at most? She shouldn't be able to do this. And on top of that, they feel as though the series was actively saying she couldn't use the Force, and so when she did do it, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And then I've heard arguments on Luke and how he first pulled the lightsaber in the Wampa Cave in Empire, and how it took him 3 years of training to actually do it. And so they believe Sabine's Force pull moment takes away from Luke's moment. So that's what I want to talk about today. Was Sabine's Force abilities just shoehorned into the story, even though Ahsoka and Rebels both said she couldn't use it? And does this ruin Luke's story? I want to start by discussing the argument that Sabine had very little Force aptitude, and that this is something both Ahsoka and Rebels establish. Huyang says,
"And I can safely say your aptitude for the Force would fall short of them all."
And then even Sabine herself says,
I don't feel it.
And then I'll admit, even I was against Sabine's Jedi training at first. Why wouldn't Kanan have trained her fully if she was supposed to be a Jedi? It really bothered me, but then I rewatched some Rebels clips and I was reminded that Kanan said, in some ways, Sabine has more potential than Ezra, which completely changed my perspective on Sabine. And not only that, that's not even the only hint that we get that maybe Sabine was Force sensitive in Rebels. Multiple times throughout the series, we hear the Force theme in association with Sabine, and then if I remember correctly, there's a scene where Ahsoka mentions hearing some voices and Zeb can't hear it, but Sabine is able to. It's very minor stuff, but I think it was all foreshadowing this series. And I think this was Dave's plan from the beginning. Now, it's really important to remember that all beings are connected to the Force. Some are just more in tune than others. This is something that George Lucas himself establishes. And then Dave Filoni reinforces with two very specific scenes in this series. The first is Ahsoka's lesson to Sabine, where she directly tells her that all things are connected to the Force, and that Sabine would need dedication, training, and focus if she wanted to connect to it. Then, the second one is the scene with Jacen and Hera, where they stand on the cliff listening to the waves. Jacen has a strong connection to the Force, something his mother does not have, but with his help, she's able to connect to it and hear Anakin and Ahsoka fighting. Both scenes, I believe, are directly foreshadowing Sabine's eventual use of the Force. Also, Sabine wasn't just training for a couple of days. We have to remember that she had some training with Kanan, but then she trained with Ahsoka for what I would say is probably 4 years. We know that she became Ahsoka's apprentice after Rebels ended, and due to their lack of involvement in the original trilogy, I would say a safe bet would be before A New Hope begins, so roughly maybe 1 ABY. And then we know that Ahsoka and Sabine split ways after the Night of 1,000 Tears, which, thanks to the final episode, we know was during the end of the war, so roughly 4 ABY. So I'm not going to claim that I know exactly how long Ahsoka trained Sabine, but I would say 3 to 5 years is a safe bet. That is a lot of time spent training, especially if she wasn't able to connect with the Force once. And so I don't think her training in the Ahsoka series was training per se, it was more her finishing her training, which I know is similar, but I think an important distinction to make. I think it's important to note that Ahsoka saw potential in Sabine, not only to be a Jedi, but also to fall to the dark side. After the Purge of Mandalore, Ahsoka was worried Sabine would let her anger and desire for revenge corrupt her, and I don't think she would have felt this way if Sabine had no connection to the Force at all. Then, people argue that Sabine failed to use the Force repeatedly, so why can she just do it now? And to that I have to say, anyone who believes this missed the point of these scenes. Sabine tries and fails, I believe, 4 times to use the Force throughout the series, which is discouraging to her, but she doesn't give up. She keeps trying, and in the moment she needs it the most, she finally is able to connect to the Force and pull her lightsaber to her. In this moment, she saves not only herself, but also Ezra, which I think makes for a way more compelling story arc than someone who just connects to it naturally. Let's compare this to Rey. Personally, I really like Rey as a character, but there's no struggle in her journey to use the Force. The first time she tries to use it, she does. And while I think this is a testament to how strong her connection to the Force is, it is also a far less satisfying story. So I really love Sabine's journey to becoming a Jedi. She trained for years, failed repeatedly, refused to give up, and eventually was able to use the Force. To me, this is a fantastic story that feels like it was the natural progression to not just Sabine's journey in Ahsoka, but also her journey in Rebels as well. Now, let's discuss Luke. First, I think it's an important note to make that Empire takes place in 3 ABY, 3 years after A New Hope. And I prefer that George showed us Luke using the Force Pull ability for the first time. I think it's way more satisfying of a moment than just having him do it off screen for the first time. But as I stated before, Sabine trained for roughly 4 years. But then the Ahsoka series takes place in 10 or 11 ABY, meaning Sabine wasn't able to use the Force till roughly 10 to 12 years after she started her training. For context, Luke started his training after Sabine, and then not only did he use the Force for the first time before her, but also was able to save Vader and beat the Empire before Sabine was able to even use the Force once. So no, I don't think this ruins Luke's story at all. And lastly, I heard arguments about Yoda's line about Luke being the last Jedi, and how Ahsoka and the gang take away from that. Well, first, Yoda could just be wrong, if I'm being honest, but also at this point, Ahsoka did not consider herself a Jedi, which also Yoda makes this statement in 4 ABY. So at this point, Ahsoka and Sabine may have already split ways or were about to. Then, Baylan and Shin also don't consider themselves Jedi. And lastly, Ezra was in a whole different galaxy, and they weren't sure if he was alive or not either. So I don't think this ruins Luke and Yoda's moment either. But what do you think? Anyway, I really love Sabine as a character and her story arc as a whole. She is the perfect example of a character who has very minimal talent, overcoming that through training and dedication. And I think Dave is giving fans what a lot of us really wanted to see from the sequel trilogy, the return of the Jedi after the Empire falls. I think we're going to see more Force wielders pop up in the coming years, and I think Ahsoka and the gang was a really good place to start. But what do you guys think? Let's have a discussion below in the comments. Also, if you like Star Wars, which I'm guessing you do because you watched this video, you should check out my podcast, Animal Squadron, wherever you listen to podcasts, also linked in the description below. The Animal Squadron is a Star Wars dedicated podcast hosted by me and some of my best friends, where we literally just talk about whatever Star Wars related things we want every single Friday. We really love it, and I think you will too. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Mother Goose out.